Welcome everybody. This is going to be week 6 that we're getting into now, and we're going to be going into peer revisions this week. But before we do, I wanted to go over one of the big things that kind of stood out to me whenever I went through the final drafts. It seemed like just about everybody had a little bit of trouble with paragraph structure. And so one thing I'm going to do in this video is go over paragraph structure, what kind of makes up proper structure, and kind of explain what I'm looking for whenever I look for the organization of the essay. So first off, I don't have a whiteboard here. I actually recorded this video before at my classroom, but it didn't have any sound, so I needed to record another one. So here goes take 2, but again I don't have a board. So what I'm going to do is just kind of outline it on Word, and then I will point out what I'm talking about in an actual example essay. So let me shrink my screen down a little bit and bring up my desktop. Okay, so here we have an example essay. Now before, and this is actually taken from my last semester class, 101, actually not last semester, it was 2 semesters ago. But nonetheless, this person is talking about their job, and this is for their reflective narrative. And their reflection portion, or excuse me, their story portion was talking about, you know, how they don't really want to work at their job anymore, but they went through this experience where they didn't really qualify for a lot of other things because they didn't have their right educational requirements. And so, as you can see here, their thesis, it's been cleaned up a little bit, but it's in order to have your career, or have a career that you want in the medical field, you must first have the education required by the position in order to gain employment. Okay, so that's pretty clear. There are some things I would suggest about the thesis. Namely, you know, be a little bit more specific with what type of education you're looking for. We're clearly talking about post-education or post-secondary education, but are we talking like a master's? Are we talking a PhD? Are we just talking a bachelor's and associates? And also, what part of the medical field? And then also in this thesis, I would also look for, you know, what are the repercussions that happen if we don't do this? What are we trying to avoid, or what might happen if we didn't do this? But nonetheless, this video isn't on the thesis, just to give you some FYI. Now, for the paragraphing structure, she starts off by kind of introducing her story, and the 3 things that I'm really looking at, if you're curious, and I'll kind of go down here a little bit. The very first thing you want to do in your paragraph, and this goes for any paragraph, a narrative, an analysis essay, a synthesis essay, whatever, you always want to organize your paragraphs by first giving a topic sentence. So no matter what you do, your very first sentence sets the outline for the rest of the paragraph. So even if you say, all cats are ugly, well, you have now committed yourself to the rest of that paragraph talking about how cats are ugly. Okay, so make sure that your very first sentence is the sentence, that you are going to focus on for the rest of the paragraph, because then number 2, or part 2, becomes explain your topic sentence. Now, if you're explaining your topic sentence, what we're talking about there is that you have started off with a topic sentence. Here's an example. Let's say there are several ways in which one can gain their desired employment, but having an education is paramount. So that's just kind of going off of her topic, the student that I took this paper from. And so, beginning with my paragraph, there are several ways in which one can gain their desired employment, but having an education is paramount. And so having an education is like the most important thing. And that kind of goes along with what she said. So now you have to explain that topic sentence. And here, you're going on to talk about it. Here, you would want to kind of start talking about what's already been focused. So clearly, the focus here, several ways, how to get your desired employment, and education is paramount. So we know that we're going to talk about education being the most important way to get employment, or to gain the employment you want. Depending upon the type of employment, there will be a mandated series of requirements, that one must first reach. And then this second section is going to be the bulk of your paragraph. So if you're only going to have three sentences in your paragraph, well, this section is only going to be one. But if you're going to have, more of an in-depth paragraph, which most likely you should have at least, 4 or 5 sentences, you want to have at least 2 or 3 in the second section. So that sounds a little bit confusing, so let me explain what I'm talking about. The third section, once we get through this, is going to be the transition. And so here, and what the transition does is it, well, I hate to use the word in the definition, gets a reader from one topic to another. So let's say that our topic sentence is going to be one sentence, and our transition sentence is then going to be one sentence. And there really isn't any other variation for this. You only get one topic sentence because it has to be the first sentence in the paragraph, and there really can't be more than one transition sentence because it has to be the last sentence in the paragraph. So everything in between is the bulk of the paragraph, and this is where you explain the topic sentence. And so clearly you already have 2 sentences. Technically you really only need 1 more, but to have a really good solid paragraph, you're going to need at least 2 to 3 sentences. So that's what I'm talking about when I say this bulk is going to be multiple sentences. So let's say the second sentence then. Depending upon the type of employment, there will be a mandated series of requirements that one must first reach. Some things that people do in their paragraphs, and this is something that I highly recommend, is to give examples about what you're talking about. So I just said something that was kind of complex. Depending upon the type of employment, there will be a mandated series of requirements that one must first reach. So basically what I'm saying is every job you choose is going to have some kind of prerequisites that you first have to achieve, educationally, before you can get that job. And so I'm going to explain that kind of in layman's terms in the second sentence, because giving examples is one way to really help the reader understand what you're saying. In teaching, for example, one must have a bachelor's degree in science if they would like, or if they are endeavoring upon becoming a science teacher. And so that kind of gives an example of what I just said. I just talked about in this first sentence, depending on your job, you're going to have certain education requirements. The second one, I gave an example. If you want to be a science teacher, you're going to have a bachelor's degree in science. Now, that actually isn't correct, but nonetheless, I'm just trying to show you how the writing would go. Now, you have enough sentences here to satisfy the requirement for the 2 to 3 sentences here, the minimum for your explanation of the topic sentence. We don't really have a very good sentence, a very good paragraph here because we haven't really displayed our point very well, but it gets the point across a little bit. The point, now the question that a lot of people say, well, how do I determine what the point of my paragraph is? Well, you look back at your topic sentence. This is the point. So if any time in the paragraph you find that you're no longer giving information that talks about what your topic sentence talked about, it's time to start a new paragraph. And so preferably, if you do start a new paragraph, you need to have a transition between your explanation and your next paragraph. So one way that's easy to do that is just kind of talk about what you've just talked about in this paragraph and say why you're going to the next part. So let's say that our next topic sentence is going to be about another way to gain employment, which would be interview skills. While education is paramount in most fields, majority of jobs rely heavily on the individual's interviewing skills. So that kind of tells the reader, we just talked about education and what the requirements are for this particular field, and for most fields there's going to be differing educational requirements, but a majority of jobs also highly rely on interviewing skills. So we can tell the reader there, and the reader can kind of tell at this point, the next paragraph is going to be about interviewing skills. So that's what the next topic sentence is going to be, something along the lines of that. So if we went to the next paragraph then, we would restart at 1, and this becomes our topic sentence. As noted, or as mentioned above, there are a number of educational requirements depending upon the position that you are seeking, but interviewing skills are also considerable for particular types. Well, interviewing skills are pretty well important across the board, so that's probably not a good idea. But interviewing skills are critical in most cases, and that's kind of an understatement, but nonetheless it gets the point across. Because now what we can do, and if you do decide to organize your essay this way, or your paragraphs, you can just delete what we have here delete what we have here, and now we have a paragraph, and it's a well-structured paragraph because we have our topic sentence. There are several ways in which one can gain their desired employment, but having an education is paramount. Depending upon the type of employment, there will be a mandated series of requirements that one must first reach. In teaching, for example, one must have a bachelor's degree in science if they are endeavoring upon becoming a science teacher. While education is paramount in most fields, a majority of jobs rely heavily on the individual's interviewing skills as well. So now comes our second paragraph. And so that is our new topic sentence. And notice how all the sentences in this paragraph support this single topic sentence. And from here down, you can assume that the rest of the paragraph is going to follow suit with this topic sentence. So that is how it's supposed to be done whenever you are organizing your paragraph. Let me give you an example of this student, kind of a non-example of what not to do. Again, she was talking about in order to get the career you want, you got to have some education behind you. Excuse me. And here she says, growing up, I had always envisioned myself with a career rather than a family. The career was all I had dreamed about while growing up. Helping injured or ill people is what I love and desire, and I've always wanted to be a registered nurse on the laboratory and delivery floor. So here, she's talking about that career. She's talking about how she, growing up, because that's specifically what her topic is. While she was growing up, she had envisioned herself with a career other than a family. So she needs to now tell me, what was she thinking about when she was growing up? Why did she do this? And particularly, while she was growing up. So while she's growing up, what did she envision? And she does that right here. She says, as a kid, I was dreaming about doing this, and ultimately I wanted to be on the labor and delivery floor. I not being there all started with not being accepted in Texas A&M. So now she goes from this information about when she was growing up and that particular dream she'd always envisioned growing up, and now she has switched topics because her not being accepted into Texas A&M doesn't necessarily help explain this topic sentence. While she was growing up, she had envisioned this dream, but not getting into Texas A&M are two completely different things. And so if you looked at it from an organizational standpoint, that would be 1, dream while growing up, and then 2, what did she say? Not being accepted. So we can just put Texas A&M. So these two things are clearly two completely different topics. So at this point, she needs to hit enter here and start a new paragraph. Now that creates another problem. She doesn't quite have a complete paragraph because she doesn't have her transition. How do we get from dream while growing up to Texas A&M? What happened? What's the connecting there? So we need a transition. So let's finish reading this paragraph. I not being there all started with not being accepted to Texas A&M. I believe that was my biggest downfall of all, and not having the support and the push as well. And again, I haven't really changed any of these words, so sorry if I struggle with reading it. I figured I didn't need an education, though maybe I could be one of the lucky ones to get a job in a hospital and learn on the job. So again, she's completely stepped away from the idea of her growing up with this envisioned career. We're no longer talking about that. We're talking about the school. So it's clearly a new paragraph. Now the transition, we need to transition from one to the other. One way we might do this, helping injured or ill people is what I love and desire. I'm reading her last sentence here. And I've always wanted to be a registered nurse on the labor and delivery floor. However, before I could achieve this dream, I would need to meet the minimum, tearing it up, aren't I? Meet the minimum educational requirements for becoming a nurse. That's what he said. Oh, a nurse on the nurse at this level. Now the reason I didn't say a registered nurse on the labor and delivery floor, right here I typed a nurse at this level, and I didn't say registered nurse on the labor and delivery floor, is because I'm trying to stay away from being repetitive. I don't want to say the exact same thing, so I try and change it up with using different language. So that's what I did. Now this transition, I took what she talked about and I made a bridge to what she's going to talk about. She's going to talk about school, so I said, however, before I could achieve this dream, I would need to meet the minimum educational requirements before for becoming a nurse at this level. So now, as the reader, you know what's coming next. You know she's going to start talking about the educational requirements for becoming a nurse, and of course she does. And she starts talking about how she didn't get in here, and she was just hoping that she would get a job. So now she needs to kind of start backtracking a little bit and saying, I didn't quite get that job or get that education, so I needed to find a new plan, or whatever you need to do for this last transition. But we don't know where she goes because I don't have the rest of the essay. Well, I have this, but this is what I just typed. So nonetheless, at this point, that's what I'm looking for. I am looking for the topic sentence, the explanation of the topic sentence, and the transition to the next point. Okay, and then you start all over. Topic sentence, explanation, transition. Topic sentence, explanation, transition. And it just goes over and over and over until you've completely made your point. So in summary, that's basically what I'm looking for whenever I look for the organization of the essay. Granted, I'm looking for, intro, section 1, section 2, section 3, conclusion, if you have 3 sections of your essay. But beyond that, to go a little bit more focused, I'm also looking for paragraph structure and, well, of course, sentence structure, but that falls under grammar.